Where is human consciousness actually created? Right now, you are looking at a screen. You see the words, understand the sentences, hear the voice reading inside your head, and may be wondering, will this video get straight to the point, or will it go in circles for another 3 minutes? The interesting thing is that you are not only seeing these lines of text, you also know that you are seeing them. You know where you are sitting, know that this body belongs to you, and know that the thoughts appearing in your mind belong to you. Except for a few thoughts at 3 in the morning. Sometimes no one wants to admit that those thoughts are theirs. But the very ability to recognize that I exist and I am experiencing something is one of the greatest mysteries in science. So where is consciousness located? Is there a secret room inside the brain where a tiny version of you sits in front of dozens of screens, controlling the body while complaining that it has to go to work again today? Unfortunately, scientists have searched for quite a long time, but have not discovered any tiny employee like that. Science has not yet found a single center of consciousness. Consciousness is most likely created by the continuous coordination between the systems that maintain wakefulness deep within the brain, the thalamus, and multiple networks located across the cerebral cortex. In other words, consciousness is not like a director sitting alone in a private office. It is more like a gigantic company where billions of employees constantly send emails, make phone calls, attend online meetings, and sometimes work without anyone knowing exactly which department is responsible. First, we need to distinguish between two concepts. The first is the state of consciousness. This refers to whether you are awake, drowsy, in deep sleep, dreaming, under anesthesia, or in a coma. The second is the content of consciousness. This is everything appearing within your experience. A face, music, the color red, pain, a sensation of cold, a memory, or the thought of what you should eat for dinner tonight. The state of consciousness can be imagined as a television that has been switched on. The content of consciousness is the program being broadcast. When you are in deep sleep, the television may be almost completely off. When you dream, the television switches back on. But it produces its own program, writes its own script, casts its own actors, and has absolutely no concern for logic. That is why in a dream you can be attending school, riding a dinosaur, and arguing with a talking cat at the same time, while still feeling that everything is perfectly reasonable. For the television of consciousness to operate, the brain must first be supplied with power. This role involves systems located deep within the brain, including the brainstem, hypothalamus, thalamus, and basal forebrain. These regions help regulate the sleep-wake cycle. Alertness, heart rate, breathing, and the ability to maintain activity in the cerebral cortex. The brainstem can be compared to a technician on a film set. It does not write the script, play the leading role, or receive an Oscar. But if the technician accidentally pulls the wrong power cable, the entire program ends immediately. Severe damage to certain regions of the brainstem can cause a person to lose the ability to maintain wakefulness. However, being awake does not necessarily mean being fully aware. A person may have their eyes open and maintain sleep-wake cycles, yet show no clear sign that they are aware of their surroundings. Simply put, the lights being on in the theater does not mean the movie is being shown. Next comes the thalamus, a structure located deep near the center of the brain. In the past, the thalamus was often described as an information relay station. Signals from the eyes, ears, and body pass through it before being sent to the cerebral cortex. But modern research shows that the thalamus is not merely a delivery worker. It is more like the very strict doorman of an exclusive club. Every second, the brain receives an enormous amount of information: light, sound, smell, temperature, pressure from clothing, traffic noise outside, and even an itch that appears at the exact moment you are trying to concentrate. If every signal were given equal priority, the brain would end up like a group chat with 5,000 unread messages. The thalamus helps regulate which signals receive priority, which regions need to become active, and when different areas must coordinate with one another. It also helps adjust the threshold that allows a signal to enter the range of awareness. But the thalamus cannot create the entirety of consciousness on its own. To produce specific content, we need the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex is the layer of tissue covering the outside of the brain. Divided into many specialized regions, visual areas process shape, color, movement, and faces. Auditory areas process sounds, voices, and music. Somatosensory areas process touch, temperature, pain, and the position of the limbs. Other association areas help connect information with memories and meaning. For example, your eyes do not actually see a dog. The eyes only receive light. The brain must process outlines, colors, and movement, then compare them with memories before concluding, yes, this is a dog. Another region may then add, it is running toward me. Another region says, it does not seem to be wearing a leash. And finally, the entire system collectively reaches the most scientific decision possible. Run. This shows that the content of consciousness is not created at a single location. Each type of experience depends on the networks suited to it. Seeing a face involves regions that process faces. Hearing music involves auditory networks. Feeling pain involves multiple regions that process the body, emotion, and attention. The issue becomes more complicated when we consider the prefrontal cortex. This region is involved in planning, decision-making, working memory, attention, and the ability to report what we are experiencing. The prefrontal cortex is like the spokesperson for the brain. It can say, I saw a face, but the fact that it reports an experience does not necessarily mean that it is where the experience was created. Just because a news presenter reports on a storm does not mean that the presenter created the storm. This is one of the greatest difficulties in studying consciousness. When a participant in an experiment presses a button to report that they saw an image, the front of the brain may become active because they are paying attention. Remembering, making a decision, or preparing to move a finger, scientists must find ways to separate the activity that creates the experience from the activity used to report the experience. And the brain, in its admirable spirit of cooperation, does not make this task any easier. Another important idea is that consciousness may depend on feedback loops. When the eyes see an object, the initial signal travels from the eyes to the thalamus and then to the visual cortex, but a single forward transmission of the signal may not be enough. The information must also travel back, moving between higher and lower sensory regions, between the thalamus and cortex, and between systems involved in attention, memory, and awareness. It is like an important document that must be sent through several departments. Edited, checked, returned, and then forwarded to 3 other people who are on vacation. Feedback loops help the brain strengthen information, compare it with memories, maintain it long enough, and combine multiple features into a unified object. When you see a red ball flying through the air, you do not separately experience the color red, a circular shape, movement, and location. You see a red ball flying directly toward your face. That unity is an important feature of consciousness. The brain must create many different states while also connecting them into a unified experience. Red must be different from blue. Pain must be different from itching. The face of a friend must be different from the face of a stranger. At the same time, color, shape, sound, and memory must be bound together. Consciousness, therefore, requires more than intense activity. It requires activity that is organized, rich, and sufficiently complex. A room containing 1,000 people shouting the same word is not necessarily more intelligent than a room containing 10 people who are genuinely exchanging information. Dreams provide another interesting piece of evidence. While dreaming, you may see, hear, feel afraid, and move through an imaginary world, yet your body is barely interacting normally with the external environment. This proves that consciousness does not necessarily require the real world to continuously provide data. The brain can build its own setting, create its own characters, and convince you that attending a meeting without wearing trousers is a completely real situation. Dreams also show that outward behavior is not a perfect measure of inner experience. This is especially important in medicine. Some patients cannot speak, move, or follow commands, but their brain activity suggests that they may still understand instructions, for example. When asked to imagine themselves playing a sport or walking through their home, the brains of some patients produce the appropriate activity patterns even though their bodies cannot respond. This forces science to separate 3 abilities: having an experience, understanding a request, and controlling the body in order to respond. A person may retain the first 2 abilities while losing the last one. Therefore, a lack of response does not mean a lack of consciousness. There are currently several competing theories attempting to explain consciousness. Global workspace theory proposes that information becomes conscious when it is broadcast widely so that many systems in the brain can access it. Integrated information theory proposes that consciousness is related to the ability to generate information that is both rich and impossible to divide into independent parts. Recurrent processing theory emphasizes signals that loop back. Other models focus on interactions between the thalamus and the cerebral cortex. The problem is that no theory has achieved an absolute victory. The current situation resembles a debate in which every side has evidence. Every side has weaknesses, and no one is willing to leave the meeting room, so in the end, where is consciousness created? The best answer currently available is, not in a single place. Systems deep within the brain maintain wakefulness. The thalamus coordinates and controls the flow of information. Sensory and association regions create the content of experience. Frontoparietal networks help us pay attention to, use, remember, and report that content. Continuous feedback loops connect everything into a relatively unified stream of experience. Consciousness may not be an object located inside the brain. It may be an ongoing process, like a piece of music that does not exist separately in the instrument, the strings, or the musician's hands. It appears only when all of them work together correctly. But the most difficult question remains unanswered. Why do electrical signals in the brain create the sensation of the color red? Why is the activity of neurons accompanied by pain, happiness, fear, and a sense of self? Can an artificial intelligence system truly experience anything, or is it merely very good at simulating experience? Science is gradually identifying the systems necessary for consciousness to exist, but the reason matter can produce subjective experience remains a mystery. And perhaps the strangest thing is that the brain itself is using consciousness to study how the brain creates consciousness. In other words, the suspect is investigating its own case. That certainly will not create any conflict of interest.